Imagine a place that was just thrust into the world entirely alone. We're talking about a tiny, resource-starved island that somehow engineered its own incredible survival against literally all the odds. So today, we're diving into this explainer to unravel the absolute paradox that is Singapore.
Right off the bat, consider this geographical impossibility. A tiny dot on the map suddenly pushed into an unexpected independence that demanded, drastic, unprecedented solutions. You have to wonder, how exactly does an island with literally zero natural resources transform itself into a global economic titan?
Section 1. The Little Red Dot, a Geographic Paradox. Back in 1998, Indonesian President B.J. Habibie famously referred to Singapore as merely a red dot on a map. And honestly, it's a stark illustration of the island's immense vulnerability. I mean, with a land area of just over 744 square kilometers, Singapore has absolutely no hinterland. There are no sprawling agricultural fields, no vast mineral deposits waiting to be mined. Geographically speaking, it is entirely, completely boxed in.
But here's where it gets interesting. This dot is actually more like a fragmented puzzle. Singapore consists of a single main island, Pulau Ujang, which is surrounded by over 60 tiny satellite islands and islets. This fractured, broken-up geography just makes their whole journey of nation-building even more astonishing.
Section 2. An Accidental Nation, the Trauma of Independence.
Okay, let's take a really rapid journey through time, because Singapore's past is deeply scarred by sudden shifts in power. It was established back in 1819 by Stamford Raffles as a British trading post, but the island later endured the immense trauma of World War II, falling to the Japanese in 1942 and being renamed Shonanto. Fast forward to the post-war era, and Singapore sought strength in numbers. They tried a brief, turbulent merger with Malaysia in 1963, but ideological differences quickly spread like wildfire and tore them apart, resulting in this sudden, abrupt expulsion just 2 years later.
So, thrust into independent statehood on the 9th of August 1965 under its first Prime Minister Lee Kuan Yew, it truly was an accidental nation. There was no grand celebration of liberation here. Actually, it was more like profound anxiety. They had no natural resources, not even enough water to sustain themselves, and they had to rapidly invent a blueprint for their very survival.
Section 3. The Economic Miracle, Engineering Survival.
So what do? How do you survive when you have absolutely nothing except for a highly strategic location? Well, you engineer an economic spectacle. To put this into perspective, by 2026, Singapore's estimated nominal GDP per capita is projected to hit a staggering $107,758. That ranks it fourth globally. It went from an unwanted island to one of the richest nations on Earth in just a matter of decades.
The scale of this is wild. Averaging a phenomenal 6% growth rate between 1965 and 1995, the government transformed the island into an indispensable logistics and financial superpower. They essentially weaponized their geography, turning the port of Singapore into this massive global maritime hub. By the 1980s, they had pivoted sharply into high-tech sectors like wafer fabrication. And crucially, they guaranteed extreme stability, enforcing a strict zero-tolerance policy against corruption that secured them an exclusive AAA sovereign credit rating.
But, this economic miracle didn't happen in a vacuum. It was driven by a highly centralized, pragmatic system of governance. While Singapore is constitutionally a multi-party democracy and free elections are held regularly with opposition parties present, it functions as a de facto one-party state. The People's Action Party has maintained continuous political dominance since 1959. Historically, they've prioritized rapid economic development and strict social order over extensive political pluralism.
Section 4. A Manufactured Identity, Creating the Singaporean.
Now, let's look at the people. When Singapore became independent, most of its citizens were actually transient migrant laborers. Their loyalties were tied to Malaya, China, and India. The state had to literally construct a national identity from scratch. Even today, the population remains highly diverse, predominantly Chinese, followed by really large Malay and Indian communities.
To manage all this diversity, they engineered this really delicate policy of multiracialism. Mandarin, Malay, and Tamil are all recognized as official languages to respect those distinct cultural roots, with Malay holding the special status of national language. But to bridge the divide, English was adopted as the great unifier. It became the common working language used exclusively in numerous public services. It's a truly remarkable piece of social engineering.
And alongside strict laws enforcing racial harmony, the nation adopted meritocracy as its guiding, fundamental philosophy. The state heavily emphasized that every single citizen would be judged and rewarded strictly based on their ability and achievements. The idea was to provide everyone a chance to succeed, totally regardless of their ethnic or social background.
Section 5. The Garden City, an engineered utopia.
Here is a somewhat tragic reality, though. The unrelenting march of early urbanization and deforestation meant that Singapore lost a staggering 95% of its historical forests. As the concrete expanded, the natural fauna and flora were pushed to the absolute brink, confined to just a tiny fraction of a percent of the nation's land.
But to combat this stark decline, the government initiated a visionary Garden City plan all the way back in 1967. They made a deliberate choice. Instead of just building an endless concrete jungle, they would literally weave nature directly into the urban fabric. So today, despite having the third highest population density globally, nearly 10% of Singapore's total land has been legally set aside for parks and nature reserves.
Today, iconic spaces like the Singapore Botanic Gardens, which, by the way, is the only tropical garden in the world recognized as a UNESCO World Heritage Site, and the incredibly futuristic Gardens by the Bay, well, they prove a profound point. They show us that even the most hyper-developed, densely populated spaces on Earth can successfully engineer a living, breathing oasis.
As we wrap up this explainer, I want to leave you with a final, lingering thought about the little red dot. When absolute vulnerability forces a people to innovate, to completely engineer their economy, their society, and even their natural environment, is anything actually impossible?